What is up, all you individuals out there? It's me, full-time anime man. Now, for this particular episode of What If Deku Was a Firewolf, what if, like, I'm gonna do my best to, make things, short and simple. Because, lately, you've already seen how long I make these videos, and, I really do try to cut down the time. So, I'm gonna do my best to make this video at least 20 minutes long, or 30 by the most. 30 by the least is what I meant to say. Okay, so let's go ahead and give it a shot. This is What If Deku Was a Firewolf, Part 12. Hope you all enjoy. Okay, so where we last left off, Izuku had gotten Shigaraki arrested, and All For One recruited Muscular, but Muscular only vowed to help. But wait, let me try again. But Muscular only accepted to help All For One if they could help him track down the wolf man that critically injured Stain. On a bus, everyone of Class 1A was riding it, and Izuku, Bakugo, and Shoto are reading on the topic of the prison break that Shigaraki has escaped, thanks to this Muscular character. And Izuku says, oh man, it's like we can't get a break from this guy. Bakugo then says, what do you think he wanted to talk to you about, Izuku? I don't know. If I had to guess, I think it would have been about Stain. Do you guys think he might have had something to do with this? Shoto says, well, there's no telling. All we can do right now is be on our guard. Suddenly, for a while after driving, the engine area started smoking, and Aizawa ordered everyone off the bus. And the Wild Pussycats would come in, and they would explain that they will be walking the rest of the way to the campgrounds. And so Pixie Bob would have everyone fall down on the side of the mountains towards her animal beasts. Anyway, Izuku would be the first to take action by throwing flame through his palms, turning one of the creatures into a sort of still sculpture. And in doing so, he notices that he almost caught a tree on fire. Damn it. Everybody be careful. Anyway, Bakugo would blow some of them up, and Jiro would ask Koda if he could, control them and get them to stop. Izuku would say, no, he can't, because they're not real. So anyway, they would have no choice but to continue their fight. Bakugo would blow one up, Shoto would freeze one, while Ida would use reciprocal bursts plus his enhanced strength on one of them, shattering into a million pieces. Sue and Uraraka would send one into space. And, that fight would just go on for a while. There were about 12 of them, and Izuku had made sure to keep count, and there were only 11, and yet one of them seemed to have disappeared. From right behind him, the last beast did pop out, but what happened next, all the classmates Izuku didn't even see coming. For what attacked that beast was a bear-like giant itself. Everyone stares in bewilderment as this giant beast thing was fighting the Earth Beast. Izuku looks closer, and he realizes that this thing resembles that of a bear and a muscular man-like creature combined into one. His eyes then widen, for he finally understands who this bear is, but he decides to watch before taking any action. Anyway, while the two beasts continued to fight, the bear would actually gain victory by destroying all of its kneecaps, and then doing the final blow by slamming his paws down on its head, not only destroying its head, but cracking the ground from underneath it. The bear then looked at the students of 1A, and they would all get on guard prepared for a fight, but Izuku stepped forward and the bear started walking towards Izuku. Yaoyorozu says, Izuku, what are you doing? Izuku raised a hand as he continued to walk. The bear and Izuku meet in the middle, and Izuku looks deeply into the bear's eyes, and the bear looks back at Izuku, and Izuku says, Kachan? Wait, Izuku? Whoa! Whoa, you're so big! Oh my god, what have you been doing? Where'd you get this quirk from? I don't know, I just woke up with it one day. They both start jumping around, cheering, like, oh man, it's great to see you, it's been a while everyone in class was just confused about what was going on. They were all just weirded out that Izuku was talking to this bear, but nobody could understand what the bear was saying except for him and Izuku, and maybe Koda. So anyway, Ida would step in saying, Izuku, you know him? Yeah, I do. He's one of my friends that I saved a while back when we'll talk about that later. He looks over to Yaoyorozu and changes the subject. But hey, it's really great to see you, man. Hey, look, these are my friends right here, my classmates. They would all say hi, but like, Kachan would say something, but obviously they wouldn't understand what he's saying. And Izuku says, wait, I don't think they can understand you. A few minutes would pass, and Izuku would talk with Kachan, and they would catch up. Eventually, after even a shorter amount of time than before, they actually made it to the campground sooner than later. The wild pussycats were a little creeped out that a bear was escorting them to the camp, and Mandalay speaks in an obviously scared voice. Did y'all know that there's a bear following y'all? Izuku said, yeah, this is a friend of mine. Oh, okay, is he gonna be around the entire time you guys are around? Izuku thinks and says, I don't know. Are you? Yep. He said, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, we've laid some food down for you all to cook by yourselves, so go ahead and get to it. Everyone walks off and gets ready to cook. But Izuku spots a child in the distance, and he walks over to him and introduces himself. He says, hi, I'm Izuku Midoriya. This boy had a look of annoyance on his face, and he batters his fist back to punch Izuku in his, but then Izuku blocked it, saying, hey kid, I'm just trying to be friendly. Koda then scoffs and he stomps away. Mandalay then says, I'm sorry about his behavior. He hasn't really been the same ever since his family was taken from him. Izuku looks at Koda as he says he's lost both of his parents. Yeah, he has. In the cooking area, everyone was getting ready to make some curry. They had all the necessities. All they needed was some firewood to get the heat going to cook the meat and the rice. Kirishima volunteered to go and get some firewood, but before he could, everyone heard a loud thud that shook the earth. They looked in the direction where they heard the loud thud from, and what emerged from the woods was Kachan, the bear with a giant tree in his mouth, dragging behind him. Kirishima then says, never mind. Izuku says, well, hey, dude, don't feel so down, all right? Here, you can go ahead and use your quirk and chop this up in little pieces. Kirishima hardens his fists up and he says, my pleasure. And then he starts chopping it up, and they make the food. Now, everyone was chowing down, and Izuku made a big bowl for Kachan the bear, saying, here you go, buddy, eat up. Thank you. Well, actually, you see, something happened while they were cooking. You see, while they were cooking, Kachan the bear actually approached Izuku while he was mixing up the rice, and he whispered into his ear saying, Izuku, Is that the girl that started the fire a while back? Yeah, she is, Kachan, but she really is sorry about what she did and she wants to atone for it. Kachan the bear then said, "Oh, okay." He then walked over to Yaoyorozu and she said, hi there. Kachan the bear actually spoke, but Mina could not understand what he was saying, for all she heard was bear noises. She then said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying." Kachan the bear continued, I'm really sorry, but I don't understand you." Ida steps in saying, if I may translate, he's saying that he forgives you for what happened in the forest a while back, and anyone who is a friend of Izuku's is a friend of his. Oh, well, thank you. That really does mean a lot to hear. Yaoyorozu then reaches up and she rubs Kachan on his head, and he feels delighted by it. So, when they finish cooking, Izuku sees that Koda, the small child from before, was watching them, and he had a look of starvation on his face. Izuku made him a bowl and he followed him to his secret hiding spot. And he said, "Hey there, Koda. You looked hungry, so I thought I would bring you some food." "Go away." Well, Izuku says, "Well, I'm sorry, was it something I said?" "No. You and your stupid classmates are just a waste of space right now. You guys think you're actually here to improve your quirks because you think that you're helping people? Well, guess what? You're not. Because heroes create villains, and villains kill people like my..." Koda paused for a second as he gets a flashback to the last time he saw his parents' body. My parents. Izuku didn't quite hear what he said, and he said, "Wait, what did you say?" "It's nothing, just leave me alone." Izuku then said, "Are you talking about your parents and how they were taken from you?" "What? How did you know that? Did Mandalay tell you?" "No, it's just... I remember reading a topic on 2 water heroes that were killed by a muscular villain a long time ago. I just assumed. I'm sorry." "Whatever," said Koda. Izuku then sighed and said, "Hey, Koda, can I ask you something?" "What?" "When your parents were still around, did you feel this way about them too when they were heroes? Or were you proud of them because the people actually looked to them for protection, and every time that they would show up, that they would know that everything would be okay?" Koda then scoffed while clenching his fist and said, "They were never there for me, okay? Every night when I was at my aunt Mandalay, I would always stay up all night and waiting for them to come and get me, but they never did. I remember just like wishing on a star that one night that they would just come and get me and we could be a family, but they never did. I barely even had a chance to saw them. Most of my life was my Aunt Mandalay raising me. You know, why do I feel like I lost something that I never had?" Izuku then thinks for a second, and he puts the food down, and he kneels down on Koda's level and says, "Koda, can I share with you a secret? It's kind of a touchy subject, but I'm willing to share with you." "What?" "You see, when I was 4 years old, a few months after I got my quirk, I got this scent of burning aroma. And I followed the scent to my mom's room. She had this urn in her closet, and underneath that urn was some paperwork. So I took the paperwork and I read it. It was a piece of paper that read the topic of cremation, and that explains the urn. But underneath that paper was a death certificate of Hasashi Midoriya. He was my father, and his time of death was July 15th, which just so happened to be my birthday. You see, my mom saw me. She came into the room and took the paper from my hands and put it back in the closet. I asked her, "Mom, who's Hasashi Midoriya?" She then took a sigh and then sat me down on her bed and kneeled down to me, and she said, "Son, Hasashi Midoriya is your father. You see, on the day of your birth, he had a car accident trying to come to the hospital to witness your birth. But the car accident took him. Izuku then said, and sometimes I think back to that day, and I think to myself, if I was never born, would my father still be alive?" See, Koda, what I'm trying to say is that, everybody's got somebody that they lost. But those people tend to live on within our lives and in our memories. We live through their legacy and what they believed in. And your parents, there is no doubt in my mind that they loved you very much. And I'm pretty sure that if they had a chance to, they would have hanged up their capes and would have wanted to spend more time with you. Anyway, I've ranted on long enough. I'll leave you alone. Izuku walks off, but before he could turn the corner, Koda says, "Hey, I'm sorry for your loss." Izuku smiled and said, "Thank you." And he leaves him alone. Koda then looked at the bowl on the ground, and he started chowing down, not even using the silverware that Izuku bought. He just used his hands. In the sauna scene, everyone was relaxing until Mineta started talking about how much he wanted to see the girls out of their clothing, which was just on the other side of the wall. Mineta was about to climb the wall, but then Izuku sneaked up from behind him and said, "Hey, Mineta, could you turn around for a second?" Yeah, sure, Midoriya. What's wrong?" Ah! He stopped and screamed, for he saw Izuku in his werewolf form. His ears were arched backwards and the back of his hair was standing up. He was exposing his teeth, snarling and growling with his snout muscles flexing. And he said, "Do it and I will rip your arm off. Do you understand?" Mineta then quivered, falling to his knees, and said, "Yeah, I understand." It's the next day, and everyone was training on making their quirks stronger. Tiger Claw, or wait, his name's just Tiger. Tiger would train Izuku on how to control his temper, like when he gets too angry, so that his fire quirk doesn't go unstable again. He would punch Izuku over and over again, and Izuku would not be allowed to fight back. Although at one point, it looked like Izuku lost control of his fire quirk, and Tiger said, "Nah, we are in the forest, and you don't want to burn it down now, do you?" Izuku then took a deep breath as he clenches his fist as the fire went back into his body. And before he could even say, "Oh, that was a close one," Tiger then punched Izuku again, and they had to start all over. It was dark, and everyone was exhausted. Izuku fell to the ground saying, "Oh man, That was so exhausting. Bakugo then said, "You're telling me." Shoto then said, "I'm hot and I'm cold at the same time. I'm literally hot right now." Then Pixie Bob then says, "Great job, everyone. I hope you're all ready for what's about to happen next," because everyone then did a deep sigh because they thought that they were going to do more training. But instead, Pixie Bob opened the door to the mess hall, revealing tables full of food everywhere. They all looked and they got up, and Pixie Bob said, "A little reward for your hard work. Go ahead and chow down. Hope you enjoy." They all start walking and mostly stumbling towards the food. Izuku had a hard time getting up, and he looked at Kanchan the bear and he said, "Here, could you help me up?" He then helps Izuku up while Izuku leans on him towards the mess hall. But Mandalay stopped them and said, "I'm sorry, Izuku, no animal friends, okay?" Okay. He then looked at Kanchan and said, "Don't worry, I'll bring you back something to eat." So, some time would pass, and the stars were out. And the Wild Pussycats would say that they are doing a test of courage on the students. So a few minutes would pass, and suddenly Izuku gets a familiar sensation. Like this, he says, "This sensation. I remember this. This only happens when there's a full moon at night." No, that can't be. There's no full moon. Izuku's curiosity got the best of him, and he almost looked up at the full moon, but Bakugo stopped him, putting him in a headlock down, aiming his eyes down to the ground. "Dude, don't look, there's a full moon!" Oh, that was a close one. Ida then ran over to Izuku, and so did Shoto after hearing those words. They both looked up and saw that it was true. There was a full moon out right now. Shoto says, "Izuku, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I didn't look at the moon. But why is it here?" Mandalay looks over and she sees the four troubled teens. And she walks over to them and she says, "Boys, you seem troubled. What's the problem?" Bakugo thinks quickly and he says, "It's the food, Mandalay. I think Izuku here has food poisoning." Izuku plays along, grunting and grabbing his stomach as if he's in a lot of pain. "Yeah, I don't feel so good." Mandalay then says, "Oh, well, okay, well, you could skip this session for today, and why don't you go get some rest?" "Thank you." Pixie Bob then jumps in the conversation, saying, "Wait, who got sick off of my food? That sounds preposterous." Mandalay then said, "Pixie Bob, he's not feeling well." The boys then walk off, and Kanchan the bear follows them, saying, "Izuku, are you okay? What's wrong?" Izuku turns around to face him, but he makes sure not to look up, and says, "Kanchan, I'm a little dangerous when it comes to the full moon right now, so I think it's best that you stay back here and you watch over, protect everyone that came here with me, okay?" "Yeah, I can do that for you." "Okay, thank you." The boys then walk off, and Kanchan went back to the group. The boys then make it to the building, and they put Izuku in a room with no window so that he cannot accidentally look outside. "Thanks, guys. You guys should be safe now. Why don't you guys just go back to the training, and I'll stay here and meditate for a while." Bakugo says, "Are you sure you'll be all right?" "Yeah, I'm sure. You guys should go." They then nod their heads and they shut the door, locking Izuku inside. Izuku sits down as he leans up against the wall and slides down it with despair running through his mind. What is going on? How is there a full moon right now? Is this some sort of astronomical effect or something? Has it been a month and I don't know? While he was thinking, outside, things got bad. Smoke started flying through the sky, and in certain areas, people were passing out when they entered a pink mist of smoke. Or was it purple? I don't know. Let's move on. I digress. Okay, this is where things get a little tough. Now, Mandalay would say, wait, is that a fire? When did that happen? They were about to have somebody go check it out, but then they were attacked by Spinner, and the most manliest woman I've ever seen in an anime. Okay, let's see what else happened. While Bakugo and Shoto were walking back to their original spot where they were unaware of the attack that was going on. Back at the building, Izuku's nostrils got the familiar scent of burning wood. He then sniffed the air and said, wait a minute, a fire? How is there a fire right now? Was there an accident? While in the middle of thinking, someone entered the building, and Aizawa met that person in front of the door where Izuku was taking shelter at. The student then said, quick, we need to get some help. There's villains attacking the camp right now. And Mandalay is freaking out. She doesn't know where Koda is. When Izuku heard that Koda was in danger, or possibly in danger, he lost all senses and said to himself, I have to get out there. They need my help. I gotta find Koda. But his wolf intervened, saying, but wait, Izuku, what if you end up changing and you become one of their problems? Izuku takes a deep breath and says, it's okay. I should be fine. I'm more worried about Koda right now, and that should drive me enough to help fight back the beast, just even in case I do change. I have to make sure Koda's okay. Izuku then battered his fist back and he punches the door. Luckily, Aizawa and the student stepped out of the way, because when he punched it, the door flew off its hinges and cracked the wall in front of it. Izuku then ran out while looking towards the ground as to not look at the sky or of the moon. That didn't make sense. Let's move on. Let's see, Sue and Uraraka. Sue and Uraraka were walking through the forest, completely unaware of what was going on, until they heard some rumbling noises in the bushes, and out from the bush flew a knife that nearly cut Uraraka's hair, but she dodged it, and emerged it was Toga. Alright, now we're going to transition over back to Bakugo, Shoto, and Ida. The three were walking through the forest when they came across Nomus. They both got into their fighting stance, ready for a fight, as the three monsters approached, saying, what the hell are those things doing here, said Bakugo. Shoto then says, could the camp be under attack? There's a strong possibility, said Ida. Right now, we need to take care of these things. Back to Izuku. He was running through the woods, trying his best to remember where Koda's hiding spot was, when all of a sudden, he tripped into a watery mud pit. His clothes and his face was dirty, and there was a certain thing that caught his attention when he looked down. For when he looked down to the muddy waters, there lies a full moon in the reflection. Izuku felt hypnotized by the light, and he already felt the sensation of changing, or at least wanting to. He then shook his head to break himself from the hypnosis, and he said, "No, no, go away, go away." Suddenly, he already felt his face starting to stretch out to that painful length, but then he punched himself in the face, leaving a red mark, while saying, "I don't need you. I don't need you." He takes a few deep breaths and clenches the mud in his hands, and then his face goes back to normal. He then gets back up and he stumbles and just has a lot of trouble keeping himself under control and walking at the same time. He makes it towards his Koda's hiding spot. On the cliff, Koda was watching everything that was going on, from one half of the forest being burned to the other half having a pinkish mist of clouds. What's going on?" said Koda. All of a sudden, he heard a man's voice from behind him saying, "Hey kid, have you seen a wolf man around here? Also, can I trade you that cool hat for this dumb mask? They made me wear this." Koda turned around, and right behind him was this 7'4" tall man wearing a black cloak and a white mask with polka dots on it. The man then slowly reached up to his face and he took off the mask, and the man's face shocked Koda, for he had a flashback to that day where the police showed him a photo of the man that murdered his parents. Only this time, there was a scar on his face that his parents left for him. Koda spoke, but with a lot of stutteriness. You're... you're the guy that killed my parents." Muscular then said, "Kid, you're gonna have to be a little more specific. I've killed a lot of people in my time." "The water heroes." "Oh, those are your parents. That means that your parents did this to me. You know what? Just drop the whole thing on about the wolf man. Right now, I need to enact a little more revenge on those bastards." Muscular then walked up to Koda, battered a fist back, and Koda reached his arms up and closed his eyes, readying himself for the impact, but the impact never came. He opens his eyes. He slowly looks up and he sees Izuku. He's holding Muscular's fist back, protecting him. Izuku looks back and he says, "Hey kid." He then turned his attention to Muscular, and then he battered one of his fists back and punches Muscular in the stomach, sending him a few feet away. Muscular was impressed by this kid's strength, saying, "Hey, not bad. Small kid, a lot of strength. That's pretty neat. Hey kid, before I get to that kid over there, can you tell me if you've seen the wolf man around here? You know, the guy that, tore Stain asunder." It's Stain. "Tore Stain asunder." Izuku grins his teeth and he raises his fists into the air while saying, "I'm the one." Muscular then said, You're, you're joking, right? You're the one that did all that to Stain." "Yep. This is a joke, right? Like you're joking, right? Because there's no way a little pipsqueak like you can actually freaking, like, do that kind of damage towards somebody like him. And what's this thing going around saying that you can resist this quirk? That's freaking impossible. I refuse to believe this, and right now I feel insulted even you just saying that to me. Tell me, who is the wolf man right now?" Without even giving him a response, Izuku charges in at Muscular, and they both begin to fight. Izuku would give Muscular a good fight for a few minutes, but there's there were definitely a few parts where Izuku was having trouble himself. But almost said Stain, due to Muscular having all that muscle and Izuku being smaller and faster, Izuku could definitely have the upper hand against him. Now, after a few minutes of punching and blocking, Muscular would actually get really irritated by Izuku and would actually grab Izuku by the head and knee him in the stomach, temporarily putting him into submission. Izuku gets on his knees and he holds his stomach from the pain, for it kicked the absolute air out of his lungs. Muscular, acting all high and mighty, even though he's just as tired, said, Don't don't tell me that's all it took to put you down, right? Just a simple kick to the stomach like that? I gotta say, I'm disappointed. Izuku gets even more irritated and he brings fire up to his fists and he stands back up and he continues his fight with Muscular. Now, Izuku has increased his strength a little bit during this because, dummy strength. So, yeah, he's doing a little more damage to Muscular than before. And in this case, Muscular would actually bring more muscle around his arms. Like pink flesh would appear from underneath his skin and around his arms, increasing his strength a little more as well. But Izuku would be turning that skin into bacon, slowly. After a few minutes of this going by, Koda is watching and he is amazed of Izuku's power and his strength. But then, Muscular kind of pulled a cheap trick. While Izuku punched him to the ground, Muscular grabbed some dirt and he threw it in Izuku's area, in his eyes, blinding him temporarily. Muscular then uppercutted Izuku on his chest, and Izuku flew into the air. And when he came back down, Muscular then swung his fist downwards, making the ground crack with Izuku's body. Izuku was badly hurt, and blood was falling from his head. Muscular then said, I gotta say, you're putting up a pretty good fight, kid. I'll give you that. But if it's true that you're the Wolfman, why haven't you changed yet? I heard that you need the full moon in order to change. Suddenly, he sees Izuku opens his eyes, and then he flinches, turning his head sideways and tightly closing his eyes. He looks up, and he sees the moon, and he finally gets it. He finally understands that Izuku has to look at the full moon in order to change. And so, he smiles devilishly, and then he grabs Izuku by his throat, and then the back of his head, and raises him to the moon like a trophy. Go on, look. Izuku, who is coughing and gagging, says, No. Muscular then starts to torture Izuku to get him to open his eyes. He grabs him by the foot and he twists it, making, like, telling him to look. Izuku doesn't respond. He then takes his left hand and then he breaks all of his fingers, making them bend the opposite direction. Look! Izuku just floats there, just breathing, not saying anything. Muscular then said, Alright, I've had enough of this bullcrap. And then he slams Izuku into the side of the mountain, and then he continues to punch him, and then he fell to the ground as rocks and debris from the mountain fell on top of him, but only a little amount. Muscular then looks up and he gets an idea, saying, You know what? You're so scared of using your own quirk. No wonder why you lose control. Because you refuse to channel it and make it your own. You're pathetic. You'll never be a hero like this. I'm about to end this. It was a decent fight, but you could have did better. Say goodnight. Muscular then battered his arms back, about to punch the side of the mountain to make rocks and debris fall on Izuku, but suddenly the back of his head got wet. When he turned around, he saw Koda with his palms wet, and he said, "Leave him alone." Muscular then smirked and said, "I'm about to get to you in a second, kid." And then, without even saying another word, he then punched the side of the mountain, and rocks and debris fell on Izuku, but a larger amount of it. It landed on top of Izuku, covering his whole body and his head and his eyes. Well, at least a little bit of it. He then turned his attention back to Koda, and he started walking towards him. Izuku, who was still conscious underneath the rocks, looks up at the sky with one of his irises. He then thinks to himself, I have no choice. You want me to set you free? Fine. But if any harm comes to that boy, I'll kill you. Izuku starts to change. His muscles start to grow and his snout starts to expand and stretch. He then says, before he changes completely, "Do you hear me? I'll kill you!" He then successfully changed as the rocks started to shake around him, and werewolf Izuku popped from the ground and let out a loud roar that caught the attention of everyone in the camp, especially Bakugo, Shoto, and Ida, who heard the familiar roars of Izuku. They looked in the direction where they heard it, and they said, Izuku. Izuku howls at the moon, and then, once he's done, he looks at Muscular and he smiles, saying, finally. Could finally see what all the fuss was about. The two then slowly start to walk towards each other, and then they build up the momentum running at each other. They then jump into the air, readying their melee attacks. But Izuku is the first to lay down the hit. He lands a deep scratch on Muscular's chest, exposing most of his rib cages through the scratches. Muscular starts to bleed rapidly as he lets out a grunt that sounded so painful. Why, you little... Before he could even finish that sentence, he was met with a hit to the face that sent him into the side of the mountain, just like he did Izuku. He then punched him into the side of the mountain over and over again until he made a deep crater into the side of the mountain that they almost practically made a cave. Muscular fought back a few times, but Izuku would hit back harder. After not even a few seconds of this going on, Muscular was getting more and more irritated that this thing was actually outwitting him. Like, he won't admit out loud that he's stronger than him at this point because he's got one more trick up his sleeve. And so, with one kick, he then places both of his arms on the side of the crater to anchor himself, and then he kicks Izuku out. He does one flip before turning to his knees and using his claws to stabilize himself and looking to the hole. Muscular does a little applause as he walks out, with his blood continuously dripping from his wound and a few bruises on his face and other parts of his body. And then he says, very nice, but I got one more trick up my sleeve. He then reaches into his pocket and pulls out a bulky red disc that almost resembles an eye. He then places it into his scarred eye area, and all the muscles around him start to grow and expand bigger and bigger to a painful length. He lets out a maniacal laugh and says, "Now we can finally get started." He then slowly charges at Werewolf Izuku, but then Werewolf Izuku then powered on his flames would form a fiery mohawk that went from the base of his head down to the center of his spine. And then he would have like fire on his arms that almost resembled armor. And fire would also be on his knees. The two would then charge at each other again. Only this time, Muscular had a little more of the upper hand considering the strength enhancement. But Werewolf Izuku then huffed and puffed, and he blew fire at Muscular, causing him to cover his face with his big arms, and most of his arms got charred and bristled, and his skin started to make that crispest sound that bacon makes when it gets cooked. And then he charged at Izuku again while the flames were still around him. His body was overflowing with adrenaline. He then landed a punch on Izuku and sent him flying backwards into the side of the mountain just like before. He then charges at him again, but then Werewolf Izuku's eyes started to glow as he intensely stared at the red disc in his eye. And then Muscular felt a painful, sharp, burning sting in his eye. He stops and he hovers both of his hands over his eyes as smoke began to come from his eye socket. He screams in agony, and then he looks at Izuku while saying, You're doing this?" Without even giving him a response, Werewolf Izuku then uppercutted Muscular, and then he fell onto his back before landing on the ground. He went a few feet into the air and then fell to the ground. Werewolf Izuku then mounted on top of Muscular, and then he started hacking and slashing at his arms. Muscular screamed in agony because of the pain. It hurt so much. And then, once he was done with one arm, he went for the other. Koda watched in horror as he watched this man being torn to shreds, and he slowly backed up from fear, and then he falls off the cliff. Yeah. But before he could really fall off the cliff, Werewolf Izuku caught him just by a hair. And then he raises him up to his face, and then he gives him a few sniffs. He remembers Koda, and he puts him down gently. Looking over to Muscular was on the ground, and he was laying in a pool of his own blood. His arms didn't even have muscles anymore. It was all just bone and veins with little chunks of his meat on the bones. The werewolf Izuku stared at him as Muscular looked at him, and then he looked at the ground, and then he drew his final breath. Muscular had laid there, Muscular lies there, dead from blood loss and probably blunt force trauma. Werewolf Izuku then looks back to Koda, and Koda gasps. We then cut to Aizawa, who was running outside to go help the wild pussycats, but then he heard running noises in the distance. He turns where he hears it, and he sees this giant werewolf running towards him. He is frozen with fear and is unsure of what to do. But then he remembers, wait a minute, I can cancel quirks. And then he uses his quirk cancellation on Izuku, and Izuku turns back to normal. But as he turned back to normal, Koda had popped into Aizawa's vision, and the two of them roll, and Izuku quickly grabs Koda, taking all of the impact for him. When they finally stopped, it was in front of Aizawa. Izuku had let it go of Koda, and the two slowly get up. Izuku, after rubbing the back of his head a few times, looks around and he says, Aizawa, you pulled me out of my werewolf transformation. Thank you. Aizawa was confused, saying, what happened? Izuku looks at Koda, and Koda looks back at Izuku. Koda is still shaken by what happened, and he says, a villain tried to attack me, but Izuku came in and saved me. He's he's passed out, but he's losing a lot of blood, though. Izuku takes a sigh of relief. Well, at least he didn't kill him, but still, he's in critical condition, though. He needs medical attention ASAP. Izuku then said, thank you, Koda. You're really brave back there. Good job. Thanks for your help. But you should get inside. Go in there, lock yourself in a room, and wait until help shows up, okay? Okay. Koda then runs inside, and Aizawa and Izuku were left alone. And Aizawa, I gotta go help everyone else. Can you get me a pair of pants? But before they could even do anything, suddenly a light of blue flames entered their peripheral vision from the side, and they turned their attention to see fire, cremation fire, flying towards them. Izuku quickly took action. He quickly ran towards the fire and quickly absorbed it. And then he battered his fist back and saw Dabi, and he punched Dabi in the torso so hard that he flew backwards into a tree. And when he slided down the tree, he then dissolved into a mud-like substance. Aizawa saw what had happened and said, wait, was that not the real him? He then remembers that Izuku was hit with cremation fire and ran over to him, saying, wait, Izuku, are you okay? You're not burned, are you? No, I'm fine. What? But that was cremation fire. It should have obliterated you. Well, no, I'm fine. Fire's my element. I just absorbed it. I'm okay. Now, can you get me a pair of pants? Back at the fight with the wild pussycats, Spinner, the lizard-looking creature, was about to bring his dozens of blades down onto Mandalay while her back was turned. But, luckily for her, Izuku popped in wearing a pair of jeans, and he threw a giant fireball at Spinner and the manliest woman that I've ever seen in an anime. That's a nickname that stuck. I'm sure she has a real name, but it's a nickname that stuck. Anyway, Izuku threw the fireball at them, and it managed to incapacitate them and eventually knock them out through the lack of oxygen. But they were alive, but minorly burned. Izuku then told Mandalay that Koda is safe and that it's going to be fine now that he's here. But he had a message that he wanted to... that Aizawa wanted to have a message sent to everyone. Excuse my vocabulary. Anyway, she sent a message to all the students saying that they can use their quirks in self-defense if they are forced to fight. This would create a little more chaos, but hey, at least it will bring the level of violence down. Back over to Sue and Uraraka. Anyway, after the knife almost cut off some of Uraraka's hair, Toga, I almost forgot her name, Toga would pop from the bushes, and she would give the girls this scary glare that would kind of incapacitate them, like, oh man, this just crazy. And Toga would say, oh, you two look so adorable. But do you want to know how you could even look more adorable? She then reached into her pocket and pulled out a knife. If your face was covered in blood. She then charged at Uraraka first, swinging her blade down towards her, but she dodges. She then grabbed her wrist and then quickly pinned her down to the ground, but as she did that, Toga used her other hand to extract blood from Uraraka's thigh, and Uraraka distanced herself from Toga. Back to Sue. Toga then said, More. I need more blood. She then charged at Uraraka again, but then Sue quickly wrapped her tongue around her and flung her into the air. While she was flinged into the air, she yelled, Sue! And then Sue said, We need to go back to camp. I'm sure the message only meant that we could use our quirks to defend ourselves. I'm sure that's what Mr. Aizawa meant. Excuse me. Well, come on, said Uraraka. Sue was about to follow, but then she was stopped by Toga. I keep on almost forgetting her name. Toga kind of stood there after stumbling a few times and said, Sue. What a cute nickname. I guess I'll call you that too. Sue then backed up and said, No way, don't even think about it. Only my friends get to call me that. She then hopped away, but then Toga threw a knife at her hair, snaring her against a tree. And she ran over to her and jumped in the air with her arms in the air and said, Yay! That must mean I'm your friend too. Uraraka ran over to help Sue, but she saw something in the distance. While Toga got in Sue's face, she said, Oh, you're bleeding, Sue. Oh, you couldn't be more adorable. I just love blood. We're gonna be such good friends. She then brings her needle up over her arm, about to bring it down, but then she heard bear noises right behind her, and she looked over and she saw a bear paw swinging at her face. She then flew very fast towards a tree, and when she hit it, it knocked some of the bark off the tree. She slid down, and then her vision slowly came back to her as she looked up and saw this hulking beast, bear-like creature that was walking towards her. She stared into its eyes with a lot of fear, and Kachan the bear roared in her face and was about to smack down on top of her, but then Izuku came in, reached his arms in between Kachan and Toga, telling him, Wait, stop! Kachan lowered his paw, but Uraraka yelled, Izuku, get away from her, she's dangerous! Izuku raised his hands towards her, and he looked to Toga, and he slowly looked at her, and notices that she was wearing a schoolgirl uniform, so he personally assumed that the League of Villains probably kidnapped her and are holding her for, as a weapon, because they probably know how great her quirk is. Anyway, he looks into her eyes and she looks into his, and she can't help but notice that Izuku's really cute. And he has a little bit of his own blood running down his face. That makes her even more bothered. Anyway, Izuku said, Hey, are you alright? Toga did not say anything. Hey, did the League put you here? Are they holding you hostage or anything? No, of course not, said Toga. I'm here because I want to be. Izuku gives her a compelling speech, how she has her whole life ahead of her, and that, she could be doing way better things than hanging around with these League of Losers. But she then talks about the werewolf that tore Stain asunder. She vowed to drive the blade through the heart of the werewolf that did this to him. She looked over to the knife on the ground, and Izuku went over and grabbed it, and then back over to Toga. Uraraka yelled, "Izuku, what are you doing?" Izuku doesn't say anything. He then takes Toga's hand, and then places the knife into her hand, and then hovers the knife over his heart, and he says, "I did it." Toga's eyes widen and her irises dilate a little bit, while saying, "What?" "I'm the one that did that stain. Though it was an act that I couldn't control. You see, on a full moon, just like tonight, I tend to lose control of myself, and then sometimes I just end up doing the wrong thing. If that's what you came here to do, then go ahead." Toga struggled for a second, but Izuku knew that she wasn't going to do it. But he still acted on with it. Closing his eyes, Toga just grinded her teeth out of anger, and then, not even doing what she said she would if she found the Wolfman, instead, she sliced at Izuku's pants, cutting a hole into it, and she quickly got herself out of that corner and said, "Ugh, you're so stupid!" and ran away. Izuku quickly ran over to Sue and got her down from the tree. "Are you okay, Sue?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you, Ribbit." He then ran over to Uraraka, but before he could say anything, Uraraka then punched Izuku square in the jaw. Izuku turned his head in the direction that she punched him at. Uraraka then said, "You idiot! Why would you do that? She could have killed you!" Izuku did not say anything. And Uraraka continued, "My God, she could have taken you away from me. Why would you do that?" Izuku just said, I still feel guilty for what I have done. I did that stain, and I can't take it back. It just haunts my mind to this very day that if I could, I don't know what I was thinking, and I'm sorry. It's just that image will never leave my head of what I've done to Stain. A quick flash glance of the image of Stain is burned into Izuku's mind. But then he snaps himself back into reality and he hugs Uraraka and saying, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Uraraka then cries and she embraces Izuku. But during their moment of relief, Bakugo, Ida, and Shoto were running, but this time Shoji was running with them. He was bleeding from one of his appendages. Bakugo yelled, "Quickly, all you run!" They all followed them, running along. And Izuku said, "Guys, what's going on?" Shoji said, "It's Tokoyami. He's lost control of Dark Shadow." From up above, the ground started to shake and Dark Shadow appeared overhead with Tokoyami in the center. He yelled, "Stay away from me! You'll die!" Dark Shadow let out a loud roar. And as they ran, Moonfish tried to impale one of the students with his teeth, but then they dodged out of the way, and him and Tokoyami began to fight. In almost merely a matter of seconds, Dark Shadow would take down Moonfish by slamming him against the tree, practically breaking his spine in half along with the tree. Ida would give Izuku an idea, saying, "Wait, Izuku, can't you, go giant and make Dark Shadow retreat?" "Oh yeah." Izuku then turned into his wolf form and then went giant and ran into a circle around Dark Shadow, making him retreat back into Tokoyami's body. They all quickly ran to Tokoyami, making sure that he's okay, and they all try to run around and make sure everything was okay. Everyone was okay. Now, I'm gonna say everything went the same for the 1B situation. Like, Tetsu and the orange-haired girl managed to take down mustard gas and the guy with the gas quirk. Anyway, they would continuously run, but they would run into more villains, and they would actually use the traps that they laid around originally for Izuku in case he wolfed out that night. After a few traps and a few knockouts later, Izuku realized that Bakugo and Shoto were missing. He called their names, but nobody responded. Suddenly, they heard a voice from up above, and a man wearing a brown trench coat and a white mask called up above, saying, "Up here. Are you looking for these two?" Holding up three of his fingers, in between those fingers were little blue glowing marbles of Bakugo and Shoto in them. Izuku's eyes widen as he realizes that he has them, and he yells, "Let go of my brothers!" Mr. Compress then said, "Sorry, but you've been too much of a hassle, and you just can't seem to sit still in order for me to catch you. Originally, we were going after you, but I'll take what I can get for now. Ta-ta." He then leaped into the air, practically flying away, jumping from tree to tree. Izuku follows him using the same tactic, but jumping from tree to tree, but Mr. Compress was just too fast for him. Ida then got an idea, and they did the same thing that they did in the anime, but this time, Ida was there. Let's see. So anyway, as they were flung through the air, they then managed to catch Mr. Compress and pin him down, and at least, take the marbles. Could you get your paws off my throat? Thank you. So anyway, they grab the marbles from his pockets and they quickly run away. So they meet back at the camp, and it just so happens that the rest of the League of Villains were regrouping there at the same spot that they were. They didn't see the students near them, and Dabi said, "Do you at least have one student?" "Actually, I have two of them," said Mr. Compress. Izuku then broke their hiding spot and said, "Actually, we have them." Shoji then shows the little blue marbles, and Mr. Compress takes off his masks, and he smiles, saying, "I don't think so." He then snaps his fingers, and the marbles that were once in Shoji's hand then turned into rocks. He then stuck his tongue out, revealing the real Bakugo and Shoto. "Decoys?" Suddenly, a portal opens from right behind the villains, and they began to walk through it. But Toga was the only one to walk through it first, as Mr. Compress and everyone else was about to leave. Mr. Compress, did his whole speech about, "It was nice putting on a nice show for you," and does his final bow. But before everyone else could walk through the portal, Kacchan the bear then intercepted them, smacking them away from the portal. They all flew in a different direction. And Izuku, Shoji, and Ida ran towards the villains, and they engaged into a fight. Izuku went after Mr. Compress, but he was intercepted by Spinner, who threw a dagger at Izuku, but Izuku dodged it. He then looked back to where the dagger was flying, and the dagger hit Uraraka in her right shoulder. He saw her fly to the ground as she let out a scream that will forever echo in the back of Izuku's mind. This sent adrenaline and furious anger through Izuku that he lost control again, but this time he was very well aware of it. He then jumped at Spinner. He began to engulf the area with fire, and Spinner's skin would start to peel away and burn for his lizard because, you know, he's a lizard, and lizards tend to shed their skin from time to time. What kind of lizard is Spinner? I don't know. Anyway, while he's punching him, Spinner begins to bleed from his face, and, you know, he starts to turn him into a, you know, we're not gonna do that joke. Anyway, the most manliest woman that I've ever seen in an anime comes in, and she hits Izuku with a blunt object, causing him to fly away and causing him to roll over a few times and land on his back, looking up at a full moon. And Izuku's body starts to shake, he changes, and we fade to black. Izuku was standing up, fire was all around the place, and Aizawa was staring at him, canceling his quirk. Izuku could feel his whole body the way it was. His right hand was reached outwards towards the ground with his fingers extended. He looked around and saw his classmates, and all of them had scratch marks on them. Mr. Compress lied there on the ground, dead, and Bakugo and Shoto were on the ground, okay, but passed out. They all stare at Izuku, and then they look down to the ground. Izuku felt something thick and warm on his hands that, if it was who he thought he was, he would throw up. He slowly looks down, and it reveals Kachan, the bear, with large claw marks on his neck. Izuku's hand was just on the path of where those claw marks were. He then slowly looks up at Kachan the bear, and Kachan painfully looks up towards Izuku. Kachan's eyes widen as he finally realizes who he was fighting. He then said in a very raspy and tired voice, I'm sorry. He then laid the side of his head down. As he drew his final breath, a cloud of smoke exited from his mouth. Izuku's eyes started to shake and shrink as his hearing starts to fade out, and he could hear his heart beating, and he loses control of his breathing. And that's the end of part 12 of What If Deku Was a Firewolf. This one may not tug at a lot of heartstrings, but dang. Anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed this What If, and I hope everyone has a nice day, and if you made it to the end of this video, consider yourselves #blessed, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.